I used to think the biggest dream of my life was to wear a white wedding dress, walk down the aisle under warm golden lights, and see the man I loved waiting at the end of that path. I believed that if I loved deeply enough, if I sacrificed enough, then everything would fall into place the way it was meant to. But then I realized sometimes the most painful thing isn't that the man you love walks away. It's when he stays silent while the whole world turns its back on you, even his own family. It's when he lets you be erased from your own wedding day, as if you were just a passerby in the story of their lives. I'm not telling this story to seek pity. I'm telling it because I survived it. And if you've ever been hurt, ever been pushed aside, ever believed you were not enough to be loved the right way, then my story is here to remind you, you are not alone. You are not broken. You're simply standing at the edge of a new life, one where you are the center. By Surat, Chapter 1, he came with a gentle rain. I met Sean on an early autumn afternoon when my car broke down right in the middle of a supermarket parking lot. A light drizzle was falling, and I was dressed in an old business outfit, holding a torn bag of greens, staring at the wide-open hood, as if willing it to fix itself. He walked up with a gentle smile and asked a question so familiar, it felt like I'd heard it 1,000 times in the movies. "What's wrong with your car?" But the strange thing was, I didn't feel annoyed. I wasn't wary. On the contrary, I felt relieved. Maybe it was his eyes, not invasive, not judgmental, just kind. Sean helped fix my car in the rain. He didn't ask for my number, didn't make any suggestive remarks. He simply wished me a good day and drove off. And that was what made me notice him. A week later, when I ran into him again at the same store, I was the one who invited him out for coffee. That's how we started. No theatrics, no whirlwind. Just two people trying to be kind in a world that felt loud and weary. Sean was a man of quiet grace. He didn't talk much, but he always remembered how I liked my tea, unsweetened, that I was afraid of thunder, and that nothing irritated me more than someone being late without a heads up. With him, I felt safe. Not the kind of safety that made my heart race with excitement, but the kind that made me want to sit still in a small kitchen and listen to him read aloud for the both of us. When he proposed, there were no fireworks, no hidden cameras, no getting down on one knee in a crowded place. Just an evening after we'd finished the dishes when he handed me a cup of tea and a ring in the palm of his hand. "I can't promise to make you laugh every day," he said, "but I promise I'll never disappear when you need me." I said yes without a second thought, because I believed in that man. I believed I'd found someone who wasn't perfect, but real enough to build a life with. When I told my friends about him, I once called him a gentle rain after a dry summer. And it was true in my world, tossed around by fleeting romances, empty promises, and the weight of loss like a rudderless boat. Sean appeared like an anchor. I never thought that one day that very anchor would be what dragged me to the bottom. But at the time, I loved him with every ounce of trust I had, and I truly believed love was enough. Chapter 2. Small signs, but far from harmless. I met Victoria, Sean's mother, just 3 weeks after we got engaged. He brought me to a weekend brunch with his family. It was a charming little French cafe, the kind of place where Victoria had been lunching with her ladies for over a decade. I remember choosing a plain beige dress, almost boringly safe, because I didn't want to overdo it. I just wanted to make a good impression. As we walked in, I saw her seated at the center of the room, back straight like her spine was made of steel, holding a mimosa with no ice. She looked me up and down like she was scanning the barcode of a product she wanted to return. Then she smiled. But it wasn't the smile of a mother greeting her future daughter-in-law. It was the smile of an employer meeting a job candidate who was 3 minutes late. "Oh, you look tidy," she said, shaking my hand with just her fingertips. Not firm, not warm, not friendly. I forced a polite smile, telling myself, Maybe she's just a bit formal. I'll get used to it. We began eating, and the conversation quickly shifted to the wedding. Sean loves navy blue. Do you think it should be the main color for the wedding? Victoria asked while Sean was still busy reading the menu. I smiled and replied, actually, we're thinking of a soft gold palette. It's gentle and suits the fall season. She set down her glass, tilted her head slightly. Oh, but soft gold might make you look washed out. A bride should shine, shouldn't she? It sounded like a caring comment, but there was a chill behind it, like a thin sheet of frosted glass, dulling every kind word. Then came the topic of the ceremony. I was raised without religion, so I wanted an outdoor celebration. But Victoria nearly choked on her coffee. Oh, dear God, she said. I can't believe my son's getting married without a single prayer in the ceremony. I turned to Sean, hoping he'd say something. But he just gave a weak chuckle, scratched his head, and changed the subject to dessert. That was the first time I felt just a little alone right beside the man I loved. After that brunch, I received an email from Victoria. Attached were 5 links to wedding dresses she thought would suit my body type. Not a single question about what I liked. Not a single congratulation. Just the subject line, suggestions for a perfect wedding. I stared at that email all afternoon. I wasn't sure if I was being overly sensitive, or finally more clear-headed than I'd ever been. Then came the venue. Victoria accidentally sent me a quote from Romano's The Restaurant, where she'd celebrated her own anniversary along with a note. They offer a special package if you book through me. Beautiful, classy, with private parking. Anywhere else and your guests will be late. Sean said she's just trying to help. Mom worries too much, don't let it get to you. But I was starting to let it get to me, not because of the suggestions, but because of the way she was shaping the entire wedding without ever asking me. I was the bride, and yet I was starting to feel like a bystander, as if a chessboard had been laid out. And I was just a pawn. I never imagined something as joyful as planning a wedding could make me feel so invaded. And I never expected that small things like color palettes, venues, or wedding dresses would become the match that lit a real war. But looking back, it all started with those little details. Chapter 3. When the bride begins to disappear from her own wedding. I used to believe that if I were patient enough, polite enough, and knew how to stay in my lane, everything would turn out fine. But in truth, the only thing smooth was the way I was pushed aside quietly, without a sound. It all started when Victoria offered to help with a few parts of the wedding. Sean reassured me, "Don't worry, Mom's just helping. All the final decisions are still ours." I breathed a sigh of relief. Stupid me. The first week, Victoria created a group email thread to keep everyone updated on the wedding progress. It included me, Sean herself, and 2 of his aunts, who also happened to be her best friends from college. It struck me as odd that no one asked who I wanted involved, but I didn't want to stir the pot. A few days later, I found out there was another email group that I wasn't added to. The only reason I knew was because one of the floral vendors accidentally replied to me instead saying, "The design has been finalized by the groom's mother and 2 aunts." Finalized. Since when I asked Sean, and he hesitated before saying, "Maybe Mom just wanted to speed things up, but I'll talk to her." He did, but nothing changed. The guest list started to inflate. I remember submitting a neat list of 70 close friends and family. A week later, Victoria sent back an Excel file. The number had jumped to 187. Nearly 60 of those names meant nothing to me. Golf buddies of her husband, classmates of her grandfather, the wife of her veterinarian. When I pushed back, she said, "Oh, think of this as building social capital. Weddings aren't just about 2 people. As a daughter-in-law, you need to be generous." Generous. With a budget that I was covering. Because, and here's the ridiculous part, I was the one whose credit card was on file for most of the contracts after she suggested it would be a good way for me to show I was taking responsibility for my new family. And Sean, he simply said, "It'll all be shared money eventually anyway." I started to feel like a doll in a white dress, pretty obedient and completely controlled. each week I got emails from the planners, decorators, lighting techs, and all of them began the same way, approved by the groom's mother. No one asked me. I privately messaged Victoria, gently saying I wanted to be involved in all decisions, at the very least, the song I'd walk down the aisle to. She left me on scene. No reply. 3 days later, Sean texted, "Don't take it personally. She's just trying to help." It was the 5th time he'd said that, and it was also the first time I realized that my anger was no longer buried. It was surfacing, slowly, steadily, and unmistakably. I wasn't even angry at Victoria as much as I was at myself for letting it all happen. I couldn't understand why I'd allowed someone to quietly, methodically, take away a day that was supposed to be mine. All I knew was that if I didn't stop it soon, by the time the wedding arrived, I'd be standing there smiling at strangers, wearing a dress someone else chose, walking to music. Someone else liked eating food I'd never even tasted. And I would no longer be a bride. I'd be a background character in the story of my own life. Chapter 4, you don't need to attend the rehearsal dinner. There's something strange about being erased from your own life. It doesn't happen in an explosion. It happens quietly, subtly, with precision. I realized I no longer held any real role in the wedding, when the rehearsal dinner was scheduled and no one told me. I only found out because my close friend Rachel called and asked, "Do you want me to help with your makeup for the rehearsal on Friday?" I just saw Sean's mom post a countdown, 2 days till rehearsal dinner. I laughed, but not out of joy. I laughed because I had no idea there was a rehearsal dinner on that day. At first I thought Rachel had made a mistake, but when I checked Victoria's Facebook, the post was right there in full view. So excited for the rehearsal dinner at Romano's. Thank you to everyone who RSVP'd Romano's, the restaurant she had suggested back when we first met, the one I had declined because I wanted a place with an outdoor garden. And yet, it was her venue. Again, I called Sean. "Is there something you want to tell me?" He paused for a few seconds, then spoke in that hushed, glass fragile tone, like he was afraid to break something. "I'm sorry. Mom planned it kind of last top minute. And since you said you were busy this week, we figured we wouldn't bother you." Busy. I almost laughed again. Busy with what exactly? The thing you never asked me about. He sighed like he was the one being wronged. "You always get stressed when we talk about the wedding. Mom just wanted to take some pressure off you. Take the pressure off. They were cutting me out and calling it relief." I hung up, said nothing more. It felt like someone had just taken off my engagement ring without saying a word. That night I went to Romano's, not to join the rehearsal, but to confirm what I feared had become real. I stood outside the private banquet room. Through the glass I saw Victoria beaming, raising her glass with guests, while servers glided past with trays of sparkling champagne. Sean sat at the center table, surrounded by family, and beside him a girl in a white dress, his cousin, the one who was standing in for me at the rehearsal, because I was too busy. No one looked toward the window. No one noticed I was standing there. And in that moment, I understood. I wasn't just being excluded from the wedding, I had been replaced. And worse, they thought I'd quietly accept it. I walked away in silence. No tears, no rage, just one truth repeating in my head. I paid for the party they used to erase me, and I swore they would not end that night as the winners. Chapter 5. They laughed at the party, but I booked the room. I sat in my car for an hour just 2 blocks away from Romano's. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. I was just awake. A strange kind of clarity, as if my soul had finally grown tired of asking for permission to exist in someone else's story. I opened my phone and logged into my work email, the one that held the banquet contract I'd signed 2 months ago. The contract was under my name. The nearly $4,000 deposit had come from my credit card. I combed through every clause, paying close attention to the final note. The lessee reserves full rights to cancel the event if used outside agreed purposes or without written consent. I took a deep breath. There are moments in life when you know without a doubt that what you're about to do will change everything. This was one of those moments. I stepped out of the car and fixed my hair in the side mirror. Not because I wanted to look good, but because I wanted to see myself one last time before walking in and ending it all. I walked straight into the venue. The restaurant manager, a woman named Clara, recognized me instantly. "You must be Miss Paige, right? You're late." I smiled. "No, I'm right on time." I held out my phone contract open. "This is the signed agreement. I'm the lessee. I paid for this room. I hold full rights to its usage per clauses A6 and A9. Clara looked at me, then toward the banquet room behind her. I lowered my voice, and I never consented to a rehearsal dinner happening here, without me present. She nodded slowly, then turned to call security. I stood there, hands clasped, palms ice cold, but my spine straighter than it had ever been. Just a few minutes later, 2 uniformed security staff entered politely. Clara pointed them toward the dining room, where Victoria was pouring red wine for a relative, and Sean was taking selfies with his closest friends. No one noticed me walking in. Not until a firm voice cut through the chatter. "Ma'am, I'm afraid I have to ask everyone to leave the banquet room. The legal contract holder has not approved this event." All eyes turned to me, and I just smiled. Victoria frowned and stormed toward me. Her jaw clenched. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I held up the contract along with the credit card statement, clarifying ownership, because it seems you forgot I was the one who paid the deposit for this place. She stared at me, her face shifting color like she'd just been slapped in front of a crowd. Sean came forward, grabbing my hand. "Paige, stop. This is my family." I pulled my hand away. "And who am I in that family?" Sean the girl, standing outside watching strangers rehearse her own wedding. No one said a word. Only the clinking of plates, the hurried footsteps of heels retreating, and a few wide-eyed, panicked glances. I stepped aside and let them pass. One by one, the uninvited guests, the people who had laughed together all night, built on my silence. But tonight, they understood. I wasn't silent anymore. Chapter 6. I became the main character in a story everyone thought they knew. I thought that after that night, after I kicked an entire uninvited family reunion out of the banquet hall, I paid for everything would be over. I had taken back control. I had stood my ground. I had said enough. But I forgot one thing. Victoria isn't the kind of woman who admits defeat just because she lost. She's the kind of woman who loses one round, smiles, and resets the entire board. Just 3 days after the dinner, I began noticing the stares at work. The whispering stopped when I walked into rooms. A coworker sent me a screenshot of a post from a Facebook group for elite moms in the city with over 10,000 members. My son just got out of an engagement with a woman who's mentally unstable. Our family did everything we could to support her, but she always saw herself as the victim. I pray she finds the help she needs. No names, no photos, but every detail lined up. The venue, the date, even the accusation that I crashed the rehearsal dinner and caused a scene. And I knew no one but Victoria could have written it, but it didn't stop there. I received an email from a bridal boutique where I had placed a deposit. They apologized and explained that the groom's mother had informed them I had canceled the wedding for mental health reasons and that I was no longer legally fit to handle the contract. I froze. They had called my lawyer. They were trying to confirm whether I was mentally incompetent, all because of a rumor, started by a woman with money influence and a face that could lie, while still looking like the picture of grace. And Sean, he called me once, just once, after the Facebook post started making rounds. His voice was full of performative sadness and some kind of social responsibility tone. "Paige, my mom's just trying to protect me. You've been acting emotionally. People are talking about you. You need to pull yourself together." I cut him off. "No, Sean. I just need to know one thing. Are you on my side or not silence?" And I had my answer, but I didn't fall apart. Not this time. What I realized was, this Victoria didn't need to scream in my face. All she had to do was whisper in the ears of others and let them do the damage. She didn't need to destroy my life loudly. She just needed to twist the truth scatter it into 100 little stories, and stand back as I drowned in a flood of polite suspicion. And the worst part, people believed her. Because how could a well-dressed, socially respected woman who donates thousands to charity galas possibly be a manipulator? No one believes it, but it's true. And this time, I couldn't call security to escort anyone out of the banquet hall. I needed a new strategy. I needed to start over, but this time with a new self, one who didn't ask for permission to exist. Chapter 7. We didn't break up because we stopped loving each other, but because I started loving myself more. I used to believe that if love was strong enough, people wouldn't leave each other. I truly thought that, as long as we still cared, everything else could be overcome. But I was wrong. What kills love isn't always betrayal. Sometimes it's silence. Silence from the one who sees you being suffocated and does nothing. 3 days after that final call, Sean texted me asking to meet. Not at the coffee shop we used to go to, not at his apartment, but at a quiet bar tucked behind a church, a place where no one who knew us would see us. He wore a pale blue shirt, his tie loosened. Still the same Sean, pleasant, gentle, and overly cautious. I sat down. He spoke first. I think we need to talk like adults. I nodded. He began explaining how his mother was emotionally overwhelmed, that she was just trying to stay in control, because she loved her son so much that maybe I had been overly sensitive, too reactive. And then he said the words that made everything crystal clear. You know, if you had just been a little more accommodating with my mom, none of this would have gone this far. I'm stuck between two women I love. I looked at him for a long time. No, Sean, you're not stuck. You chose to stand still. I put my glass down, trying to keep my voice steady. You were never asked to choose between me and your mother. I only ever needed you to choose between right and wrong. And you chose not to choose at all. He reached for my hand, his eyes soft, with the kind of sorrow that made him look like he was the one being hurt. I'm sorry if you felt hurt. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was bitterly familiar. You're not sorry that you hurt me. You're sorry if I felt that way. You still don't believe you did anything wrong. And that is the most painful part. He said nothing more. I stood up. You know what, Sean? I once loved you because you made me feel safe. But I've realized that safety only existed when things were calm. When the storm came, you weren't the one who held me steady. You were the one who stepped back and let me drown. I slipped the engagement ring off my finger. It slid off so easily, strangely light. I placed it on the table, gently. We're not breaking up because we stopped loving each other, Sean. We're breaking up because I've started loving myself more. I turned around. No goodbye, no glance back. That night, I went home, turned on the kitchen light, made myself a cup of tea. I didn't cry. I just sat there quietly watching the steam rise from the mug in my hands and asked myself, if I can rise from all of this, then what else am I capable of? And I knew this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Chapter 8. Not a wedding, a liberation dinner. I woke up the next morning in an apartment scattered with contract cancellations and a wedding dress still hanging on the rack like a white ghost. I looked at it, and for the first time, I didn't feel sorrow. I felt relief. I was no longer about to become a bride, and I was no longer a victim either. I was a free woman, and no one was taking that away from me again. I posted the dress for sale in an online group for women who had called off their weddings. Yes, it's a real group. And within 10 minutes, there were over 30 comments, not just asking for the price, but, are you okay? Been there, sending a hug through the screen. If you ever need to talk, DM me. I didn't know any of them. But their kindness, that made me cry for the first time in weeks. These were women who had fallen, but stood back up and reached out to lift others too. That's when I decided to throw a party, not a wedding, a celebration. I called it the Liberation Dinner. I rented a small restaurant with a garden patio, warm golden lights, and the same flowers I had once chosen for my wedding, except this time they were for me, not anyone else. I wore a white jumpsuit, no veil, no lace, no ribbons, just me, polished, strong, whole. I invited 20 women. Half were friends, half were strangers who had messaged me after I shared my story. We raised our glasses not to reclaim our honor or get revenge on bad men, but for something much simpler. We were still here, still moving, still living beautifully. One woman at the table, her name was Janelle, said something I'll never forget. Freedom doesn't come when others apologize. It comes when you stop waiting for them to. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't think about Victoria. I didn't think about Sean. I just thought, if I can turn a stolen wedding day into a liberation dinner, then maybe I can turn every pain into a gentle weapon. 3 days later, I opened a new Instagram account, our second chance celebrations. My first post read, I was once a bride removed from her own wedding, but now I throw parties for women reclaiming their lives with champagne candlelight and laughter. I had no business plan, no concrete strategy, but I had something stronger, purpose and freedom. Chapter 9. From the uninvited bride to the one who opens the door for others. I didn't start with the dream of becoming an entrepreneur. I started with pain. After the liberation dinner, I received over 200 messages from women of all ages, all skin tones, all walks of life. Some were left at the altar. Some were insulted by their in-laws, then quietly packed their things and walked away. Some had never been married, but still knew what it felt like to be written out of their own story. We were the same, not because of circumstance, but because we had all once loved so deeply that we forgot we deserved to have a voice. I began hosting small gatherings for them. No white dresses, no tiered cakes, no I'll love you forever speeches, just candlelight wine soft music and a small circle of women stepping out of the dark together. I called it second chance celebrations, the kind of celebrations for women who had once shattered but were piecing themselves back together, stronger, more beautiful, more true. At first it was just a party to say goodbye to an old self. Then one woman asked if I could throw a divorce celebration. Another asked me to design a ceremony marking the day she moved out of a house where she had been controlled for 10 years. One woman messaged me, "You don't know this." But that day, when I walked into the room you had prepared, with the soft lights, warm music, and everyone clapping after I shared my story, it was the first time I didn't feel broken. I felt beautiful. I felt validated. I sat there in silence after reading it. I used to think I was simply helping women celebrate after failure, but it turns out I was helping them place a new punctuation mark. Not to end the sentence, but to begin again with intention. Then one day, a local women's magazine called. They wanted to write about me, about these slightly unusual but deeply human events I was creating. The article spread, not virally, but just enough for those who needed me to find me. I was invited to speak at a mental wellness conference about recovering from heartbreak. A university reached out asking me to lead a workshop for final year students on healthy endings and redefining self-worth. I had no degree in psychology, but I had life experience and a scar I never tried to hide. Every time I light a candle at a new gathering, I think back to the moment I stood outside Romano's. Cold, muted, abandoned. And I wonder if someone had stood beside me that night, just one person placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "You deserve a place in this story." Maybe I wouldn't have felt so alone. Now I want to be that person for someone else. No wedding required, no ring, no groom. Just yourself, and that's enough. Chapter 10. Revenge isn't destroying them. It's living without needing them anymore. 1 year after the wedding was called off, I was invited to the city's largest women's charity gala, an event honoring individuals who had made a difference in the lives of self-empowered women. I hadn't nominated myself. I didn't know the organizing committee, but someone had submitted my name through their own story. By then, Second Chance Celebrations had hosted over 80 events. No weddings, no obligations. Just women who walked in with eyes full of cracks and walked out with straight backs and real smiles. I wore a black silk dress. Simple. Elegant. Not to impress, but because I wanted to feel like myself. As I entered the venue, the spotlight softly touched my face, and I saw her. Victoria. She was standing by the committee's table still with that familiar posture, back straight, pale blazer wineglass in hand, and that frozen smile. Her eyes met mine. 1 second, 2, then she turned away as if she didn't know me, but I saw it. The hesitation. The flicker of uncertainty in someone who once believed herself untouchable. When I walked up to the stage to receive the award, I didn't talk about the canceled wedding. I didn't mention Victoria. I didn't mention Sean. I spoke only of the women who came to me in silence, in pain, in fear of being labeled weak. They don't need saving. They just need an open door. And once they walk through it, they save themselves. The room erupted in applause. But what I remember most was her eyes, no longer looking down, no longer evaluating or dissecting, but the gaze of someone who knew the game was over, and she no longer made the rules. At the end of the evening, she walked toward me. No entourage, no tray of champagne, no tower of influence, just her smaller than I remembered. She said, "You did better than I expected." I smiled. So did I. She was quiet for a few seconds. Then she extended her hand. I shook it, gently, but I didn't bow. I didn't seek forgiveness. I didn't try to make peace, because I didn't need anything from her anymore. Not validation, not affection, not an apology. The quietest revenge is no longer needing to win against them. I had already won against myself. On the ride home, I sat in the back seat, a soft breeze slipping through the car window. I thought about the time I believed I wasn't enough, that I didn't belong, that I had no right to speak. Then I thought about today. 1 year, not long, but enough to build a life where pain is no longer a scar, but a medal. I was once removed from my own wedding, but tonight I walked onto the stage of my own life, not as a bride, but as the host, the storyteller, the one who controls the spotlight, and this time, I will never be written out of my story again. When I look back on everything, the whispered conversations, the condescending glances, the days I thought I was living a dream, but was actually trapped in a nightmare, I don't feel regret anymore. Yes, I lost a relationship, but I found myself again. I once wanted to be a wife. Now I just want to be myself, fully unapologetically, without belonging to anyone. And if you're hearing this, and your heart has ever been crushed by expectations control, or the silence of people who should have protected you, there's just one thing I want you to know. You don't have to wait for anyone to accept you anymore. You can rise. You can walk away. And you can throw your own comeback celebration like a wedding, but with no groom in sight. Just you, strong, whole, and radiant. And if someone ever asks me, was it worth it? I'll smile and answer softly, every single second.